Hey, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Okay. I see one thumbs up. Someone else want to confirm that you can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariel. Okay. So I'm going to jump in. You guys can leave your videos off or on. It doesn't really matter. Once I get through this brief introduction, I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint anyway. But I like to, at least in the first couple of meetings, actually be on camera just so that, we can just so you guys can see me face to face at least. I enjoy teaching face to face much more than online. And I think a lot of students online is so convenient that they lean toward it, but it's not as good as, making the connection like some of us are now. So I'm Tiffany. It's nice to meet you. We're going to go through the PowerPoint pretty quickly. I'm all about just being as quick as we can. I don't want to waste anyone's time. So with that being said, I'll jump in. You guys can pause me or stop me at any time to ask a question, either in person, just unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat box, but I might not see it until the end if you type it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and I am recording this and I'll post it in the course as well. Okay. You guys can see my screen, correct? Okay. So as you know, you're taking business writing, which is English 420. And today we're just going to really go over like the introduction to the course and then some specifics in the course. And I tried to give you tips on how to get a good grade, essentially. But before we do that, do you guys have any questions about anything in the course? I know there's a couple of assignments that are like due in 2021 for some reason, so they're showing up missing for people. I'll get that fixed this week, so it's just an issue in the grade book. But any other questions? No. Okay. If you think of anything, you can ask me at the end too. So I like to start out the course by really making a comparison between what we think of as a first impression in person and what happens with the first impression in writing. So unfortunately, stereotypes exist, and that is true both of the way that we look and the language that we choose in our writing. A lot of times you could send something out that is too casual or has a misspelling or a mistake, and you're going to be perceived as perhaps not that smart, or that you didn't really care, or that you were rushing. So all of those things create the first impression in a piece of writing. And it happens really fast, just like it happens in person. Your impression of someone can change over time, but usually that first impression sticks. And again, it's the same with a piece of writing. So if you, happen to start a new job and you're asked to send out a company-wide communication and it's not polished, it's not easy to read, all of your new colleagues are going to form an impression of you based off of that. And I like to show these two pictures of the same guy. It's corny. It's just from a Google search or whatever. But just the way the person is dressed sends a very different message, a different vibe. And people are going to draw different conclusions about this person based on how he's dressed. So I think of writing in the same way. I can dress it up for a certain purpose and to connect with a certain audience, or I can dress it down if I'm trying to be a little bit more informal. That's okay. It really just matters that you're doing it intentionally and that you're thinking about the person that you're writing to. So writing is about choices then, just like again, the comparison stands true. In person, we make choices about what we're going to wear. Like, today I made a choice to wear my PNW t-shirt, even though it maybe doesn't look very polished and professional. It's different from what I would wear in the classroom. We're all kind of in a different world post-COVID where we do these things online and it's not required that we spend an hour getting dressed to do it. So that was a choice that I made, and it's making an impression on you guys. Same thing with piece of writing. So you want to think about what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, when you're going to say it, and how you want your reader to feel after reading it. And then perhaps most importantly, how you want your reader to act after reading it. So these are all the choices that I want you guys to start thinking about when you're creating a piece of business or professional writing. And all of these questions are equally important. It's not like, oh, okay, I got the gist of it. Just think about what I'm writing. No, each question has an explicit answer, and it's something that you should think about independently for any important piece of writing. Sending a text or a quick email, you don't need to go through all of this, but if it matters, these are the questions you want to ask yourself. So in other words, if you write with intention and purpose, you can usually achieve your goal. The reason why this is so important is really because it can help you excel and climb the ladder at work. For example, let's say that you have a really great idea to improve something, save money, or make the customers happier. If you just verbally pitch that idea, kind of casually, it's probably not going to make a big impression. It might not get heard. It certainly is less likely to get acted upon than if you took the time to present a proposal in writing. This is especially true if your idea might cost money or time, like you're kind of asking for something in order to set an idea into motion. So you have to build some credibility. And the way that you do that is by being a strong communicator, both verbally and in writing. So if you have this great idea and you need to share it, your boss will take you most seriously if you approach them with both a quick verbal summary. And then, so if you're interested in learning more, here's a couple of pages I put together with some numbers and some information. And then those pieces of paper have got to be, easy to read, easy to skim. It's got to answer every question they might have about your idea. And then you've made quite an impression that you care, that you're thorough, that you have done your research, right? So you're going to earn some respect from your boss in the process as well. So that's just, a little example of something that's pretty realistic in everybody's job. You have ideas. We all have good ideas and we want to share them. So that's why writing is super important. And this may be a review if you've taken like English 104 or 105. But I like to touch on it because it's really the heart of all writing, which is rhetoric. So rhetoric is essentially just making language work for you. So a quick example, like if I want my son to do me a favor, I'll be like, hey, Jack, can you come here for a minute? Right. So that's how I'm catching his attention. On the other hand, if I'm upset about something, because let's say like the back door got left open, I might say, Jack, get over here. Right. A lot more curt, fewer words, right to the point. My tone is different. And I use that language to get the job done. It's the same thing in writing. You have to make your word choices work for you. Politicians and lawyers are like experts at rhetoric. That's essentially what their whole job is using words to convince people to do what they're asking them to do. So again, think about that. Politicians and lawyers, of course, they have to have background knowledge in what their respective fields are, but really what they're doing is using words to make things happen, whether that's in writing or on TV. That's the nature of the job. So there's two main components of rhetoric, and that's the rhetorical situation and then rhetorical strategies, which are the tools that help you write effectively. So the rhetorical situation, I like to think of it, I actually used to have a slide where it was like a bullseye with 3 different layers. And in the middle of that is a piece of writing. And the situation then surrounds the piece of writing. And the elements of the situation are actually those 5 questions that we started with back at the beginning, which we can make a little bit more concise and say, what is the purpose of the piece? So maybe it's to get someone excited. Maybe it's to make them worried. Maybe it's to get them to take action. Whatever the case may be, it should be really specific. People like to say, oh, it's to inform or it's to persuade. Like think emotionally, think about really what you want the piece to do, more so than just the 5 types of writing genres that you know about. Asking yourself, who is the audience or your readers? This is really important because you would explain something like I'm explaining rhetoric to you differently than I have explained it to my son, right? So he's like in 7th grade, but back when he was like 3rd, 4th grade, I would talk to him a lot about writing, and I had to dumb it down per se. That's not the kindest phrase, but simplify so that he could understand the concepts in a way that made sense for his level of understanding. You have to think about your audience in the same way. How educated are they on the topic that you're talking about? And this is super relevant to the Unit 1 assignment, right? You're talking to people who are resistant but they have high level knowledge of the company, but low level knowledge of social media. And of course, many other factors. So you got to really think about that in terms of the words that you choose and the order of which you present key ideas. So typically in writing, our most important idea is located usually like in the top third, maybe even in the top like 2 paragraphs. And then it's followed by the backup ideas or the supporting ideas or, the break off details. And that's what we call a direct approach to writing, where we start with what's most important and then trickle down and get smaller before circling back. And that's different than the indirect approach, which kind of makes the reader work for it, keeps them guessing all the way until the end, which can be a valid approach in certain business documents, but less often than the direct approach. And then the last point here is the context. So what does society and culture have to say about the topic? And even in this Unit 1 case, it's relevant, right? Because we are living in a social media culture. So it's bigger than just, the company wants this to happen. There's a bigger picture that's happening that you can draw into your memo to make it more persuasive and effective. One of the key points that's actually missing from this slide from the previous 5 questions was when you are going to deliver this information. In a classroom setting, you don't have any choices. You have a due date, so you know when you're going to deliver the piece of writing. In the real world setting, let's take Unit 1 as an example. If you know that the employees are currently dealing with some new piece of software, or there's something else big that's been happening, you would want to think about, okay, maybe I'm going to give it a week before I send this next piece of information, because timing is really, really important in terms of whether or not your message will be heard. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. And then rhetorical strategies, like I said, those are all the tools that you have to make your writing do what you want it to. So you can appeal to emotion, logic, ethics, authority, your word choice. We talked about indirect and direct organization. And then the amount of detail that you include is important too. If you have someone who's very knowledgeable about something and you include too much detail, they get bored. They're like, why are they telling me this? I know this. When are they going to get to something I care about? On the other hand, if you're talking to someone who doesn't have a lot of background knowledge on your topic and you don't provide enough detail, they're going to be lost the whole time. So you have to start out with a different level of detail depending on who you're writing to. And one quick note on professional versus academic writing. Probably all the writing that you've had to do in school has been the same, like fluffy essays where you have, all your APA formatting, double spacing, indent all your paragraphs. Like we don't do any of that in this class at all. You'll actually lose points for submitting things that are overwritten, fluffed up, repetitive. We're also everything is going to be single spaced. I have a slide that goes over all of this. Let me come straight to this slide since we're talking about it now. Yeah, okay. So don't indent your paragraphs, and all of your paragraphs should be single spaced. Visual design of your documents in the real world, so therefore in this class, is very important. That means no big long paragraphs. Everybody hates a big long paragraph. Even like I'm a very avid reader of many different types of things. And when I see huge paragraphs, I'm like, oh, that's going to be boring. Don't do it. Stick to 6 to 8 lines. That's not 6 to 8 sentences. That's lines that you would count at your max. It's okay to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lined paragraph. In fact, you want to vary the lengths of your paragraph. It makes the piece look better on paper. Uniformity is not appealing when it comes to a document. So that goes right along with avoiding the paragraphs, using white space wisely. And you can do that by using like bullet points and numbered lists sometimes. You guys can even put images. There's no like restrictions. Like think about if I'm at work, how am I going to make either this PDF that I attach as an email or something I print out? How am I going to make it look interesting and engaging? You can put color and you can add, like you can do anything you want because you're not breaking the APA rules because the real world doesn't care about APA rules. So you make it interesting and appealing and make people want to read it and then make them want to do what you ask them to do. we're going to use descriptive headings to help the reader navigate the document. And that just means basically you get to give little chapter titles to each important section. And in your planning log that's due Friday, it asks you to think about some of your headings. So your first heading, here's a little tip, by the way. You should never use a heading before your first paragraph, because just above that first paragraph is the subject line. And the subject line serves as the heading for your opening paragraph, which is always the intro paragraph. After that, you might have different headings like, social media is, social media is hot, right? So that's one nobody would use for this assignment. But, basically that would be then a section where you talked about why social media is so important. And then you could, go into another bolded heading that says, meeting our employees in the middle, something like that. So the idea is basically that you're separating all the key sections by using bolded headings. And that allows your reader to skim through the document easily to get a feel for what the whole thing is like and to find the information that they care about the most. So your heading should be descriptive, yet short and concise. Okay, so let me run back real quick to where we left off. Right here. And I think we're going to skip that one. So we are going to talk now about the actual assignment in Unit 1. That was kind of the crash course to writing with, I think, a lot of little tips in there for you. So this particular assignment, the linking in case, if you haven't already, you have to go to like the course's learning or the unit's learning materials and read the case that's there. And it's basically a scenario where you are a director of operations, or you're not the director of operations, Megan, the Duffy is. So you're basically put in a position where you are up the ladder and there's a ton, 200 or so employees that need to be asked to do something that many of them don't know how to do and don't want to do. So you are asked, as the director of operations, to write a memo to all of these employees. And memo is kind of an old term. Essentially, it's an email. You're going to be writing an email to all the employees. And you have to tell them that they all have to have a LinkedIn profile, whether they like it or not. It's part of the job. And you get resistance to that. You have to explain that LinkedIn is meant to be used actively. So they can't just create a profile and be like, yeah, fine, I did it. And you also want to reassure them that training is going to be available, and you need to provide some level of detail on the training. You cannot just say training will be available next Tuesday. You need to set it up at least a little bit better. Like, training will be available in conference room A on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 12 and 3 o'clock for the next 3 weeks, to help you meet the deadline. Something like that is good enough. Some people have extensive training programs that they put into their memos, which is fine, as long as we're not writing, 3-page memos. This memo is good at a page to a page and a half at the most. And then you really want to try to offer some type of incentive to get the employees to kind of go along with you, but be very careful. It shouldn't be a huge financial incentive, because that's kind of going against what the problem that the company is having to begin with. So you have to think of something that is very moderate and reasonable if there's going to be an expense involved, or it could be something that doesn't have a direct expense, like, a day off, one extra bonus vacation day. There's still an expense to that, but it's not an immediate expense that's going to hit at one time. People will choose different days. And then of course, you're going to think about what strategies can you use to accomplish this. And that leads us into part B, because we already did document design and navigation here. So part 2 or part B is the justification, which is where you're going to write me like a letter or a memo. I'm not picky on the formatting with this, you guys. I care more about what you're explaining to me. You can put Dear Tiffany and then write it out for me. So you're really just communicating with me so that I can see how well you are understanding the core components that we talked about in the first part of this meeting. I want to see that you're thinking through your word choices and where you chose to locate certain information, why you used bullet points here versus not there, all these different types of choices that you have. I want to know that you're thinking through it. as long as you do part 2, you're going to earn the credit for it. This more for me is an assessment tool just to see if anyone needs, a little bit of extra help or explanation to start thinking in the way that you're going to need to think throughout the class for the semester. And then there'll be an example justification. I don't think it's in the discussion board. I'll post an announcement with it because it's buried somewhere, I think, actually possibly in the learning materials. But you can review that if you're feeling uncertain about what the justification might look like. But like I said, it's just about you pouring your rhetorical heart out and convincing me that you get how to think about writing. And we will wrap things up with the due dates, which is the planning log that's due on 1/13. Really, the part B of Unit 1 is like the planning log, written out. No, that's a bad way to put it. Part B is like you chose 3 of the most important parts of the planning log and elaborated on those in much more detail, because the planning log isn't meant to be 10 pages. Couple sentences is fine for the planning log. But for the first unit, I'm asking you to go a little more in depth in the areas you think are the most important. And then the final assignments A and B are due next Sunday, the 22nd, by midnight. And guys, I'm not super crazy about midnight either. If you turn it in the next day at 6 a.m., I really don't care. I do typically start grading the day after something is due, like that afternoon though. So, if you have to push a little bit, that's fine, but try to have it in. Usually everything's due on Sunday, so I'll grade Monday around noon. And make sure you guys look at the grading rubric. I do use the rubric to grade your assignments, so it's important that you kind of use it as a checklist. And that wraps up the PowerPoints. So I'm just gonna stop sharing and come back here. Okay, that was quick. Any questions from you guys about anything like the assignment or any of the more conceptual stuff from the beginning? No? Okay. If you think of a question, you can email me. My email is plastered in various places. It's in the syllabus on one of the first announcements and stuff. So yeah, just feel free, reach out at any time with an email question, or if you want to meet like this one-on-one, happy to do that. Just send me an email, let me know when you're available. So that wraps it up. Thanks for coming. I think 12 of you guys came, which is awesome. It's really great attendance for something that's not required. So I appreciate that you guys care enough to be here. And I will see you again at the beginning of Unit 2. So that's the week of the 23rd. Until then, have a good one.
Thank you, Professor. You too. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. You're welcome.